Ever since I was a wrestling manager in junior high, I've always loved to watch wrestling and get involved with our school's wrestling program. When I entered high school, I didn't want to just be a manager for the team. I wanted to be a cheerleader and be part of my own team. Once our practices got started and we all started learning the cheers, we all became very eager to cheer at our first meet. The first meet that year was a Saturday tournament, and it was one experience I will never forget. Saturday tournaments are very early mornings for those involved with the wrestling community. Our tournament was in Wapello, and we had to be at the school at 5:45 to board the bus. This was actually sleeping in for some of us because on some tournaments we had to be at our school around 5 or 5:15 in the morning. When I woke up to get ready that morning, I looked outside and realized how big of a snowstorm we had gotten the night before. The roads were covered in snow and ice, and travel was not advised, but our tournament was still happening. When our bus was ready to leave for the tournament, we were still waiting on one more cheerleader who was running late because of the weather. When she finally got there, it was 6:10 and everyone was very eager to get going. The first few miles of our trip were not bad, but once we got about 20 miles into our trip, we started having problems with the roads. As we were leaving Muscatine on a divided highway, we saw a car on the opposite side of the road spin out and fly right into the ditch, which was very low, so it almost seemed as if they were flying off of a cliff. After seeing this, many of us were worried that we might crash ourselves. Our bus driver continued to drive for a few miles, but once we were coming upon a curve, he didn't slow down enough and we began to fishtail violently. After fishtailing, our driver pulled over after he regained control, and he talked to the coaches, but they told him to just keep driving, even though we had almost 20 miles to go. Once we finally got to the school, we were all safe and very thankful that we finally got there. None of us thought that the rest of the day would be bad at all. But before the tournament began, many of us cheerleaders sat in an empty hallway practicing and trying to learn more of the cheers, but what we didn't realize is that the tournament had begun, and we ended up missing 3 of our boys wrestle. Once we got onto the side of the mat for our first meet to cheer, we began to cheer as loud as we could. The match soon began to get very rough and violent, and before we knew what was happening, one of the wrestlers got thrown off of the mat and right into our laps. Thankfully, none of us experienced injuries more than just a couple bruises, but it scared us all more than one can imagine. The rest of the tournament continued as expected until it was time to leave. The tournament ended around 6:30, which is average, actually a little bit earlier than many of the tournaments. And it was dark outside, so finding our bus was expected to be a little bit difficult. As everyone else was leaving, one other cheerleader and myself decided we should use the restroom before we left the school. But once we were out of the restroom, everyone from our school was already gone and we were not able to find them. We figured that finding a bus wouldn't be that hard, but we didn't realize that there were almost 12 buses out there, all looking the same, and it was night. Once we finally found our bus, almost 10 minutes later, everyone was so glad they finally found us, and we were ready to finally leave. I was thankful that they didn't leave without us. The drive home was much more uneventful than the drive there because the roads had been thawed out and cleared out during the day. After my first tournament, I was nervous that the rest to come, but none of them have even compared to how eventful this one was. That Saturday gave me just one taste of how exciting the rest of my cheering career would be. The upcoming season will be my last, and I don't expect any meet to be more memorable than my first.